Welcome back to my workshop. Now today I've got to make a special jig for my table saw, and that's to do finger joints. Now I want to do finger joints with my new blade, which is wide. Let's have a look and see what we got. Okay, so for an upcoming project I've got to do some finger joints. Now a finger joint is like this. It's basically loads of grooves and they basically fit together like that. Okay, so this is a finger joint. I want to be able to make these with my new saw blade, which is quite wide. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a dedicated table saw sled, like this one that I made for my bandsaw, but this one's going to be dedicated for my table saw and for this blade. Okay, so what I've got is a selection of materials. I've got a piece of 6mm MDF, a bit of an old sideboard and a bit of MDF. Okay, so let's start chopping some wood. Okay, so after only a couple of cuts, we've got all our main components. We've got the back fence, we've got the actual table, we've got our slide, which I'll show you what that is in a minute, and we've got our back fence, front fence, close fence, and we've got a safety block. Okay, what we need now though is a couple of runners. Let's move this out of the way. So all I need is a couple of runners now to run in my table saw. Now I've got a piece of wood that's almost the right size, but I've just noticed something on my table saw. Fits in this runner, excellent. Doesn't actually fit in this runner. So my table saw, this runner's wider than this one. That's no good. So what I've got to do is cut this into two runners and then actually shave a little bit off of one. Let me get on with that. Right, well, it looks like this bloody idiot's forgot to turn his microphone on. Let's see what he's got to say for himself. There are his runners, obviously. Do they fit in there very nicely? Do they slide backwards and forwards? Yes, they do. Look at that. Right, it's got his base. He's drawn a line down the middle. That's where the blade goes. So what he's going to do is he's going to use his fence as a guide. They're just washers. It looks like he's going to use those as spacers, put his batten like this, and he's going to raise it above the table. So when he sticks his base on, it sticks to the wood and not the table. Put a bead of CA glue on each runner, then he can put it up against his fence because he knows that's square, line it up with the back of the table because he knows that's square, and then drop it onto the runners. Don't strain too hard. Push, push, push. Oh, looks like they've stuck. Quite relieved, I reckon. Yeah. Okay, so now he's got his runners stuck in the right place on the board. Now he's just going to finally put a little arrow so he knows which way's the front. He's happy. Right, let's get on with the next bit. Right, hopefully I've got my microphone plugged in this time. Right, so I've now got my runners. They're now screwed. Now what I want to do is put on the front fence, okay, so the one furthest away from you. Now it's not critical whether this is dead straight, but obviously the straighter the better. All I'm going to do is put it on this end, like this, just a couple of screws. So drill and tap a couple of screws. Just don't put a screw in the middle where the blade is going to go. Okay, so let me get on with that. Right, so now for the back fence. Now this one does need to be straight, okay? Now I'm not going to have it right at the very back. I'm going to have a little bit of a gap, okay? So what I'm going to do first of all is mark a line where I know where to start. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is put a screw in one end and leave the other end so it moves about. You've seen me do this before. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to fit my grooving blade into the table saw. So make sure it's unplugged. Take out the throw plate. Right, for this next bit, there are a million different methods of doing it, and everyone will talk about the swanky 5-cut method and measurements and within so many thousandths of a millimetre. Now, for me, as long as it's square, that's good enough. Now, I know my fence on my table saw is square with my blade, so if I can make this fence square with this fence, then I know it's square. Now for this I'm going to use obviously a big square, which I know is accurate, and I'm literally just going to move it until my square is square here. Okay, that's all I'm going to do, and then clamp it in place. Square, square. Okay, so that's clamped in place. I'll clamp it in 2 places just to make sure. And then check it again. Okay, square on my fence, square on this fence. Okay, so now I know that's square. Turn it over, drill a couple of holes. What I need to do now is put on the table like this, raise my blade and cut through a majority of the board, so then it comes up to this back fence, and then once I've done that, then I can check to make sure it is actually square. Right, so I'm now satisfied that it's square. What I can do is turn the table back over and put the remaining screws in the back fence. Okay, so far all we've done is made a table saw sled, okay, which is easy. Those principles can be used for whatever jigs you're making. Right, now onto the finger jointing bit. Now, first thing we do is we take our back fence slide, which is just this bit of MDF, and what we've got to do is cut a groove in it and then put a little tab in it. Let me show you what I'm going to do. Okay, so this goes on the back fence, and because we know the curve of the blade is how big we want it, all we got to do is run this through and cut a slot in the back fence. Okay, so now we've cut our slot, all we need to do is make a pin that goes in there. So we're just going to use a piece of hardwood, cut to that size and then stuck in the hole. Okay, so what we got now is our slide fence with our little hardwood insert, which is, we know, is the same width as the blade. I've stuck that in with CA glue just for now. I think that'll probably be good enough. I might give it a bit of a sand later. Okay, and if you noticed, I did it a little bit longer and then cut off the end. Okay, so we also know this bit is the same width as the blade. So what we'll do now is we'll move it over the blade and then position our little cut off next to the blade. okay, and then slide this up to it. Okay, so this goes there. So we now know we've got the blade width plus the blade width and then our blade width. Okay, then for now we'll clamp this in place. So then we can remove this and get it out of the way. So in theory, now we're ready for our first cut. Okay, so I've now got my test sample set up in the jig. I've got it clamped. If this was bigger, I'd probably hold it with my hands, but because this is quite small, I'm going to use a clamp just to be on the safe side. Okay, so this is sitting there. My blade is set to the height of the thickness of my piece of wood. Okay, and then what I've got to do now is start the table saw, move this through very slowly and cut my first tooth. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so I'll cut my first groove. Now that groove goes on the pin. Okay, and then you clamp it back in place. And then you do your second cut. Okay. Okay, so what we have then is this. So this is our first piece. Now, what we need to do is make a matching piece that slots into this. Okay, and the way you do that is you take your first piece and you turn it around and put that on the pin. Okay, and take your second piece and butt it up against it. Okay, like this. This all looks very complicated, but once you get going, it's not too bad. Clamp that into place. Okay, and then cut your next groove. Okay, so you now have your two pieces. Now in theory, these should fit together. Like that. Okay, now this is a little bit loose. Now I think what you have to do, it's too loose, you have to move this pin away from the blade. Okay, so let's try that just a little bit. Okay, so I've just done my second try. Because it was too loose, I've moved the pin further away. Now these two, yeah, that's better. I think I need to do a little bit more adjustment, but that's the basic idea. Obviously I need to get used to using it, but this is basically what you get. Okay, and what I'll probably do is once this fence is in the right place, I shall screw it permanently into place. So then that way I just need to pull it out of the cupboard and use it. All right, so that's how I'm going to make my finger joints. Okay, so that's it for this one. I've done a bit more practicing on a little bit of MDF. Yeah, this is much better. I think the more you practice, the better it's going to get. Okay, so now I've got a dedicated sled for my grooving blade to make finger joints. Okay, I've put a little bit of wax on the back, on the runners, and I've also put a guard on the back to stop me chopping my thumb off. Okay, just remember, if you're using one of these, be very careful. They're quite aggressive. If you're a bit careless, you end up breaking your brand new zero clearance insert, because I was an idiot. Okay, so treat these with a bit of respect. Okay, that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye. Here we've got, whoa, and I'm going to do that.